Hello, Steve White, Tripboy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, we've got a little bit of news on Picard, but it's mostly empty headlines with little substance. Now, the first headline is that they're going to continue on with the show if season 3 does well. Well, they don't specifically say that they're going to do a season 4, and they make it very clear, and they've made it very clear the whole time, that the whole idea of the show was to conclude the Next Generation because they didn't feel like Nemesis was a good ending. So then to turn around on that and then just do another season like that means nothing would sort of be, a lack of integrity with the storytelling and everything. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think what will happen is they'll probably just do a Titan spin-off, which of course will allow them to use all the same characters that were in Picard, but not actually continue Picard into a season 4. So I think that's what's going to happen. There's talk from the actors about them being willing to come back. Jonathan Frakes said he felt like there's a possibility of moving forward, and that's exactly it. Moving forward with that era without necessarily continuing the Next Generation story and doing a full season of Picard. They can do something else that uses the same sort of characters in that sort of time period and everything. I think that's what they're going to do. There was also talk from Patrick Stewart about how they based the show on him changing in the 30 years since Next Generation, and him feeling like, well, he changed and the world changed, so the world of the Next Generation should change. But unfortunately, it's a different century, and that just undermined everything that was Next Generation, which is why really the first 2 seasons should just be called Star Trek Patrick, because they're more about him and his relationship with today's world, which doesn't really fit into the future and the Next Generation world. So we also have talk from the other actors about their characters. Gates McFadden was saying that her character had more action, had a better story, more development, and she felt like her character was more what Gene Roddenberry intended the character to be now. And talk about the relationship between her and Picard and how that she disappeared from his life, but she returns with a surprise that thrills and engages him, and there's sort of hints that they may get back together and so forth. They also talked about optimism and how diversity and collaboration are like the main sort of thing of Star Trek. And I'm like, well, they're very important, but the future, the actual universe that these people exist in is also very important. And although these characters do, engage in, collaboration, and the diversity sort of helps that collaboration, and they're all very optimistic, and there is an optimistic look at the future, it's still within a dark world, and they sort of pulls Star Trek into this dark sort of world that sort of resembles today. And it's kind of like, well, you don't really get any points that the characters are acting like Star Trek characters in a universe that doesn't resemble Star Trek, that more resembles today. So while they've sort of undermined Star Trek and the universe as a whole, they've sort of managed to keep some of the character traits, but that's about it. So they're sort of trying to talk it up, but they still don't really get what Star Trek is. And it's just sort of funny to hear them talking about optimism within this dark world when it shouldn't be a dark world. And speaking of dark worlds, Star Trek Section 31, they're talking about that still being in development. Why are they talking about it? Because Michelle Yeoh just won a Golden Globe and maybe in line for an Oscar, so they want to try and capitalise on that and get some attention on the series and actually get it up, because there isn't a series order. It's not actually in development. They're saying it's in development, and Paramount Plus is still talking about it, but that doesn't really mean anything unless they're putting money and plans behind it. And ironically, I think the reason they're talking about the show is Michelle Yeoh just won the Golden Globe, but I think that's going to be what actually stops her from doing the series ultimately if they did try and put it forward, because she's going to be too busy with better quality projects. So why would she do this? And it is the antithesis of Star Trek. Basically what it says is the universe that Gene Roddenberry envisioned, this future everyone was looking forward to, actually is hollow and can't actually stand up by itself. It needs to be backed up by a bunch of MAGA terrorists, that it's basically hollow and just a facade. And that's just a negative thing to say about the future and to sort of undermine that future Gene created, which, seems to be a running theme here with these people and how they sort of envision Star Trek. And also, speaking of darkness, the comics There's an ongoing comic, and there is a miniseries called The Defiant, and they're both very dark, and they're just sort of dwelling in the remnants of the Dominion War and things that aren't Star Trek, religion and gods and things like that, and it's not Star Trek. And they're doing, just to add on to that, they're doing a miniseries called Day of Blood, which is all about the Klingons in the war and all that sort of stuff. And basically, just to show just how un-Star Trek it is, the cover is inspired by the cover of Watchmen, with blood running down the Starfleet Delta Shield badge. So now they're trying to be Star Trek Watchmen. They just keep trying to be something else. They just get really, really far away from what Star Trek is, and they keep missing the point, because I don't think these who really get what Star Trek is and what the universe that Gene created was and why it resonated with people and why we loved it. So not very optimistic, but that's the news at the moment.